So, have you ever been trapped in a car show before?
Uh, no, I have been trapped in a different kind of convention center based show that
hmm
maybe I'll tell you about after you tell me what you're going to tell me, or maybe it's too depressing.
Okay. Well, I was in a rolling car show. So this past weekend went to a baby shower in New Braunfels on our way to San Antonio, which is where I watched Austin flail against San Diego because we were visiting a good friend down there, a friend who got married on the cusp of the election last year in Pittsburgh. So I saw lots of canvassers. Katie was not able to go to this wedding. This is one of her best friends because brother-in-law got COVID. That kind of messed everything up in terms of dog watching and all that. I had been commissioned to bring HEB butter tortillas for the reception. So me and a Houston Dynamo duffel bag from years past went to Pittsburgh with said tortillas, sacrificed that Dynamo bag. That Dynamo bag is no longer in my possession. That's fine. So anyway, so we're going down to San Antonio. We're trying to figure out a hotel to book on the way down, and we end up deciding to it's been a long few months, so we decide to splurge. We get a fancy hotel. We're en route to the fancy hotel and we stumble into a car show that we are directly behind. So my Volkswagen ID4 looks like it's part of the car show, but this is a fancy car show. So I'm gonna go ahead and text you the homepage for Prestige Motorsports in San Antonio, which is what was hosting this car show. Went to said fancy hotel with a said ridiculous party at the end of it. Just gaze your eyes upon that photo of
So
that
before
sports car with steam around it.
before I even opened the link, that you said the word motorsports made me think, Phil, your Volkswagen would not be mistaken for being a part of this show unless it was 10 years before that car existed, when it literally would have looked like a space alien. But looking at the website for this, this isn't impugning you or your taste or the Volkswagen Motor Corporation, if that's their full name. It would be decidedly not macho enough for the vibes of what this car show looks like.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah. Granted, yes, there were Porsches and a Bugatti and a Ferrari that caught on fire once it got to the hotel and things like that.
In
But
San Antonio.
yeah, but so we just thought we were like watching this car show, and then we follow this car show, and then we realized, oh God, there are banners up. This car show is going to this hotel. Yep, we're definitely going to use the valets. And the valet people were nice and managed to extricate us from the car show. We were able to go meet this friend, have a drink, and then I went up to the hotel room and watched the very depressing game that transpired. And yeah, and then a hotel with very nice smells and very calming, and was a perfect place to process what had been a very terrible May that we're going to talk about in a second. But yes, that is my journey down to San Antonio to where I decided to take part in the very last Austin FC game of May 2025, a month which will live in infamy.
Emergency podcast. Verde did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies, being caught in a car show, emergencies with my daughter suddenly photobombing us as we start recording.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Do you have something quick? What's up?
Uh, hi.
Hi.
Hi,
Did,
people.
did you need something or are you just interrupting?
Just walking in.
Okay. Can you walk out?
I don't know. Can I?
You can.
Fine.
Okay. Love you. Bye. That's my daughter. It's the second week of summer, and she's been to camp, and the allure of camp is clearly worn off. Although she did make a game today where you could be a limo or a Lamborghini or a car. Clearly, she witnessed the car show as well. How are you doing? And how did you enjoy May?
Enjoying May. What a way to phrase it. It was a wild, crazy month. It was something that I think, looking back in retrospect at the way that you previewed the month, both in the column and on here, I feel that your predictions were very reasonable and they were very based in the reality that we found ourselves in then, which is still, unfortunately, the reality that we're in on the other side of the month until something chemical or alchemical happens. This is where things are at the moment. I didn't have as bad of a time watching the San Diego game as I think you did, though it wasn't my favorite thing that I've watched this month. My favorite thing that I watched this month was that El Paso Open Cup game, not thinking of it as an outlier or representative of what I think a lot of people have rallied around, which is, but in league play, they're this and this. To me, that El Paso game is what speaks to there being hope for the league play going through the rest of the year. Maybe something will shift and change for Mirto Uzuni going off for international duty, which you, Riley, put in today's piece. He's been on international duty for a couple of weeks, which, I mean, it's a dig, but show me how it's unfair based on the play that's been on the field. It's not personal. It's really just that's the assessment, and both of us wish that it were different. To me,
Like the meme says, why are you booing me? I'm right.
Exactly. To me, the San Diego game, it was the depleted end of a May where the team was missing Brendan Heinzike, missing Ilya, missing Sabovich. Heinzike, for personal reasons that haven't been specified, have not been revealed to the media by his coach. To find out what that was, we would have to ask him directly. We presumably won't get that opportunity until they come back home to play against Red Bulls New York on the 14th. But it says something to me that the performance against San Diego was not worse, missing three very key pieces of the lineup and having guys back from injury who were on limited minutes for Robert Taylor, limited minutes for Danny Pereira, limited minutes for Mikkel Dessler. If you want to look at it through that lens, as I do, boy, could that have been a lot worse. But I really want something to hang on to that is not, relatively speaking, let's look at the progress as we did in the second Vancouver fixture, in the second Minnesota fixture. There is progress that is being made, but it is difficult. It's difficult to really be able to relish that without there being points on the board, without there being a climb in the rankings, without there being Austin on the other side of the playoff line.
I thought that there was progress being made with those two draws, Vancouver at home, Minnesota away, just because those were difficult matches. And we did see some signs of some good play there. But I do feel like we had a little bit of regression in the last week with RSL and with San Diego. And again, when I was predicting things in May, part of the calculus was that, I knew that Danny was going to be out. Obviously, I think the Taylor injury happened before May, I want to say.
Yeah.
Obviously, thought Dessler would be back a little bit sooner than he was, but thought it would still be a little bit for him to fully get integrated and back into things. I had predicted 2-3-2, and the Atlanta and the RSL matches are the ones that stand out because those are draws and those really should have been wins. And I think everybody recognizes that. Had those actually been wins as they could have been, then I'm exactly spot on in terms of the predictions. Everything else went according to what I thought was going to happen. I thought that they were going to lose one of those Minnesota matches. I thought that was going to be the Minnesota match away. I thought it was going to be a draw and a loss. It was just reverse what I thought. Cincinnati, I thought was going to be a loss. And San Diego, I thought was going to be a loss. But the whole idea of getting through May intact was hinging in part on, okay, they're going to get a couple of wins out of this. They're going to get some points. And in seeding those 4 points, it could be moot. We don't know what's going to happen in the summer transfer window, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We don't know what's going to happen now that they're, again, we didn't know at the start of the season that they were going to be home and away already done with the top 3 teams in the West, because we did not think the top 3 teams in the West were going to be Vancouver, Minnesota, and San Diego. But here we are. We've done that, and that's good. But I also have concerns that, again, 2 very winnable games, an RSL team that is essentially without DPs, and an Atlanta team which is struggling way, way more than we thought they were going to be. All of a sudden, we're in the situation here where they're in 10th. They are out of the playoff places, and they're needing to climb back in the second half of the season. I'm not saying that it can't be done, but they put themselves into more of a hole than I thought that they were going to be at this phase of the season. We were very optimistic at the start of the season. We were talking about, okay, how many like scores of goals or, Bukri and Azuni and Vasquez going to have combined at the end of the season here. And I think it's going to be less than a score being 20, of course, for those of you who don't know, like obscure math.
As I was saying, I can look at that San Diego game through a particular lens, but looking at it through the additional two lenses of the losses against RSL and Atlanta, that changes it. That makes it such that that MLS adage that I'm probably going to misquote or paraphrase wrong of the season begins in August. Let's be honest. They really have to come back from the other side of they're not playing in Leagues Cup.
Right.
They don't have Leagues Cup fixtures. They're going to need to fill that with friendlies. They got to keep these guys going. This is something that we saw in 2023 when they didn't have any play, when a bunch of other teams had play. How do you fill that time? How do you keep everybody on their best when these guys are already, we're seeing progress from them having actual competitive minutes to play? Are the friendlies going to actually even help?
They've also been playing 2 a week in May, and I think it's been exhausting. And Nico Esteves was talking as much. I'm exhausted from the 2 weeks in May, and I just type things into a computer and publish them. I'm not running on a field for 90 minutes in sweltering heat or weird post-storm apocalyptic climates as we had with the RSL match. There are definitely things that I am doing that is less taxing than what the players are going through. And I felt it at the end of the month. I felt like, oh my God, I really need a break. I am so glad that we are back to just one game a week.
Man, you and me both. The biggest forecasting thing in my mind is one of the things that benefits them the most is they've got a bit more of a breather. They've got everybody back from injury, even though they're not at 100%. They don't have the active half dozen guys on the availability report that a lot of other clubs, Western Conference clubs in particular, have. They have not played some of their biggest guys. Like Brian White has played a lot of competitive minutes, and he's fine until he's not.
To go do some Gold Cup stuff with the national team.
Yes, exactly. And what happened with Messi when he had a CONMEBOL competition to play in? He came back not able to play in the All-Star Game or Leagues Cup.
Right. Brian White's a little more spry than Messi, but
it's
your
true.
Point taken. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. But those kinds of variables can affect the table overall. Sure. It can affect the teams that Austin has not already played home and away against. And knowing that a bunch of teams that are in Leagues Cup are part of the mix for the fall. There are some advantages to the way that their schedule looks at the moment. But we said that about parts of the early season. Things that we couldn't predict, like you said, that Vancouver, Minnesota, and San Diego would be at the top of the West. But that aside, there still were forgiving fixtures baked into what the first half of the season looked like that they weren't able to capitalize on. And it would have been nice for them to capitalize on it, was the way that we were talking about it in preseason. Boy, do they wish that they had. And going into the fall, they absolutely have to capitalize on what they can out of it. They've got to do something out of those back-to-back Copa Tejas matches against Dallas and Houston. They absolutely have to, not just for the sake of the greatest trophy in the history of sport, Copa Tejas, but
the winnable trophy.
Honestly, for their standing in the Western Conference, for their ability to not just make it into the playoffs, but have preferable playoff seating for home fixtures. They've absolutely got to do that. It is encouraging to hear from the players, not just Brad Stuver, but from all the players, that none of them are happy or content about this. There have been intimations that maybe the Columbus fans were right. Maybe ownership doesn't actually care about winning. They just care about charging people money. Without betraying background conversations that I've had and off the record conversations that I've had, it is definitely not my impression, or I think yours, that ownership and management of the club is satisfied with where things are. It is not, it's not a situation where hands are being thrown up and, well, 23, 24, 25, make it a set of 3. It is very much my impression that everything possible is being done, not just looking at the 100-year war plan that Roto has on the sporting side of things. Beyond Tuti Andrade, there is missing Christmas with your fantasy level effort being put in, though we're not going to know what that is until we actually get things concretely. And I don't know. I don't like how uncertain things feel. I sure would feel better if these matches on back-to-back weekends against Colorado and Red Bulls New York go well, sending things off into the international break. I feel like on the other side of the international break and the Club World Cup group stage, nothing would make this fan base happier than to see Austin go away to Seattle and absolutely wreck them on the other side of the most punishing group in the Club World Cup. They wore those protest shirts, and we should probably mention that MLSPA thing as well. Those players are still going to have to play those matches, and they're not going to rotate in teenagers to play in a World Cup competition. Those guys are going to show up and do their jobs, but I don't know. They're just on the other side of that Club World Cup group stage. Boy, could things be made different if they put some points up against Colorado and Red Bulls, and then they back-to-back make something happen against Seattle and LAFC.
Right. And we'll get into June specifically in a second here because I
Yeah.
do want to put forth some predictions. Since I was so good predicting May, like
Teeing you up,
offer
Phil.
what I think is going to happen in June.
Teeing you up to
which,
make me
maybe,
sad, Phil. I just love it when you make me
maybe,
sad, I guess.
I don't know if I'm going to make you sad, but I mean,
Oh.
I'll make you probably less sad than I made you about May, but I don't know that
Good.
you're necessarily going to be happy. But again, that does, once we're over that June hump that's happening as well. And I do think that there's going to be maybe some choppiness early on to tease this a little bit. But then, as you pointed out, yeah, I mean, you are going to have the Sounders going up against this kind of juggernaut group stage, which they're probably going to be eliminated from. If they're not eliminated from, if they do get through that, then that match on the 28th, I imagine, is going to be postponed because the Sounders would still be in that Club World Cup competition. But given that they are playing Botafogo and Atletico Madrid and PSG, I don't like their chances necessarily because pretty good teams are going up against there. But looking at, again, just the future here and thinking about what the goals are for the season, you are now 3 wins away from getting an Open Cup, getting a trophy, getting a substantial trophy, getting a non-Copa Tejas trophy. So maybe this is going to be like that for Houston that year where they had a pretty miserable league season, but they were able to get together a pretty magical run and ended up winning the cup. And that was amazing. That was for those fans to go on that run. Like I was there covering that. I was actually stringing for the Philadelphia Inquirer for that. So I got to convey the bad news that third time was not the charm, that they lost the third final in 5 years, but got to go into that Dynamo locker room afterwards. And it was joyous. It was amazing. It was like shirtless DeMarco Beasley holding court and talking about how it had been a bad season, but how this had been vindictive. And this was towards the end of his pro career. Not that we typically wax poetic about the Dynamo, but really special moment for those players, really special moment for those fans. I saw it firsthand. I feel like for Austin, if they were to pull this off and win this, and again, like we've talked about a few weeks ago, the draw is very favorable. If they can get over that San Jose hump, which I think they can, and if Chicago manages to beat Minnesota, which I have a weird feeling that they might. I don't know what it is necessarily, but this could line up for beating San Jose, coming home to face Chicago, and then hosting US Open Cup final. And that could be pretty magical. And whether or not Austin makes the playoffs, that's a whole different animal, and we can set that aside for now. But if you could get 3 fantastic games together, 2 of those at home, and bring a substantial trophy in the 5th year of this club's history, that would be a good thing. That would be a win. That would be something that would, I think, even salvage a season where you don't maybe necessarily make the playoffs again and there are those kind of struggles. And again, we don't know how long it's going to take for Ozuni to gel, for Vasquez. We've seen him gelling a little bit here. There's more work to be done to complete this roster. I think it's closer than it was. I'm kind of mystified as to what's happening now, and we can certainly gauge that and talk about that throughout the summer, as I'm sure we might. I don't think we necessarily need to get a new coach mid-season, St. Louis City SC style, because I don't know that that's necessarily gonna work out for them as well. But I do have some good feelings about where this might go Open Cup wise, even if the league play continues to be a struggle.
We should rip that fire the coach discussion Band-Aid off in a sec. But on the topic of Open Cup, I'm with you there. Winning Open Cup is definitely something to rebounding the season. Talking to a lot of people in the fan base and also just examining my own slumped shoulders after various games that just fell apart in bizarre, strange chaos theory ways. There is also a Open Cup win that, well, that's nice, but miss the playoffs. That does not work for a lot of people. A lot of people who have spent 2 seasons watching not even playoffs in an expanded format, and there'll be die-off. There will be die-off if that happens. But I feel like there's a fair amount of people out there who are looking at that possible outcome and going, yeah, I'm definitely done. Screw this, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Their tunes change when glanced off of metal hardware. That there is something about that, not just the storied history of the Open Cup itself, but any major trophy, including Copa Tejas, that it does change things. So I'm sure that there are probably people listening who fall into that camp of, yeah, win Open Cup, that would be great. People who vastly prefer it to Leagues Cup, and it means a whole lot to them, that are kind of like, yeah, you can win the Open Cup, but if you miss playoffs, nah, burn it all down.
Yeah, I understand that. Look today at the news. I mean, you've got
Mhm.
Tottenham, they win Europa League, but they're 17th place in the league, and they fire the best coach that they've had in a while, probably,
Mhm.
which is an Arsenal fan, like tee hee hee. That's fine. That's great. Don't mind that at all. Don't mind this weird narrative, but it's like this guy just delivered you a trophy, which is a thing that you have not done a lot of in generations.
Yeah.
So maybe you reward that with another year and see how it goes. You can fire this guy and see who you get next, because clearly that's an attractive job. Clearly taking care of a team that is on the verge of relegation. Sam Allardyce, is he available? He's a whiz when it comes to getting teams out of relegation, right? Just hoof it and hope.
Yeah, so on the fire the coach topic as regards Austin FC, I don't think firing Nico Estevez solves literally anything right
Yep.
at this moment. I'm not saying that will be the case through the entire rest of the season. The biggest difference that I find between Nico and Josh, aside from so many that I could list and have in the past, is that he has not lost this locker room. He, including the $10 million DP who is currently not performing.
Right.
And that is a rare skill set.
No, I'm kidding.
Which one? That was the joke. Thanks for picking up what I put down, Phil. We could play spades or hearts and run the table. To me, there is something very unique in that kind of skill set. And a lot of these players have been here through 2023 and 2024 and have the hangover of, oh God, this again. Oh God, this again. And he has not lost those players. Josh, it is now much better known assumptions that people made about having lost different parts of the locker room, having a disconnected relationship with various parts of that locker room, thinking they ran the team rather than the coach or the sporting operation. Those were all in the mix in 2023 and 2024. If people want the entire sporting operation fired, get rid of Roto, get rid of all the people that he brought in, that to me at this point, again, with the proviso of this isn't to say that depending on how things go the rest of the season, my mind would not change on this. I think you bringing up Ange Postecoglou getting dismissed at Spurs is a great reference point for this, because now what the Spurs have to do is just rebuild it from brass tacks. They were already going to have to do a version of that, but now they have to do it without somebody who was able to make hardware out of scrap. Literally the kindest thing I think an Arsenal fan could say about a now former Tottenham coach is that he really did a whole lot with not a lot of resources or fighting a lot of mistakes of the past. And to me, the notion of trashing a sporting operation that is just, the roots are just getting stable in the ground. When you plant a new tree and you have those two stakes on it, stabilizing it, things are at the point where you take the stakes out and the tree has found the beginning of its footing. It's not quite there, but it can short gale force winds who knows what the rest of the season is going to look like. Save gale force winds. The tree does not have a bunch of securing elements attached to it at the moment and is going to continue growing and rooting deeper and deeper and getting more stable. I feel like it would be a massive strategic blunder to go, no, let's scorched earth this thing. And while we're at it, let's throw some salt in the ground while we're at it and make this an environment where the existing players don't want to be here because they don't know what kind of crazy force majeure thing is going to blow in and completely blow up something that they have spent half of a season sticking in the trenches with, making it look hostile to incoming players that they want to bring in if they were to get rid of the sporting director right now. To me, making those moves would be nuts at the moment. And again, proviso of at the moment. Lots of things can change, as can my opinion about that.
Right. I feel like there are probably Tottenham fans out there that want Jose Mourinho back.
Yeah.
And I could see, I'm not going to like out any Austin fans and coach suggestions that I've seen, but there are MLS equivalents of Jose Mourinho that I am seeing out there as possible suggestions for Nico Estevez' successor. And I don't think that would necessarily work all that well. This is still very premature, right? The more that I know about Rodolfo Borrell at the start, I've joked in the Wolf era that he's going to Popovich this thing and he's going to fire Wolf and then take over as coach. And certainly he could take over as coach. He was an assistant at Man City. He could stand on the sideline. He could do that. I don't think he wants to do that. The more and more I know about that, I don't think that he wants that kind of spotlight on him necessarily. I do think that, again, his legacy is getting a little bit tarnished at this point. Bringing in a coach, the names you wouldn't believe kind of thing, and then bringing in the players that he's brought. It's more of a dice roll in MLS than even maybe the smartest soccer minds. It's a really tough league. Like Will Kuntz, for example, he was the MLS whisperer. He did great things at LAFC. He built a championship team at the Galaxy, and then a bunch of roster rules bit him in this offseason. You look at where the Galaxy is now. Not to keep bringing up the Galaxy, but I kind of love bringing up the Galaxy again and again. But here's a really good, really capable GM who got hit with a whole bunch of roster rule hurdles this time around, and it's been really difficult. He had a U22 switch to a DP that he had to offload to SKC. His top DP is injured, and they tried to get a player that they had to offload when he was only a couple months in before he'd even played a game for them, who would have been a good solid veteran piece. It's really tough year in, year out to do this well in MLS, and there are some roster rules that do help things along, and I think that Burrell has done a pretty good job at navigating those, but still your DPs have to hit. And Ozuni is this weird extreme case of, oh, here's this DP that we think is going to hit. We don't know if this is Gauss theorem necessarily, and he's going to be fine next year, or if he really maybe thought that, oh, I can leave my wife behind to have a child and I'm going to go focus on soccer. And maybe that didn't work out like he thought it was going to.
It is not. I think that the way that some fans have taken the results on the field, their opinions about Ozuni have gotten straight up personal, and I don't blame them. Honestly, I get it. I think there is an outside chance that maybe he does get bought out in the summer window. I do not have the impression that Anthony Precourt is in any way hesitant to spend that kind of money. And by that kind of money, literally any amount of money you would spend on a soccer team. As much as people want to keep repeating things, often things that came right out of the mouth of Columbus fans, I do not have the impression that that is off the table at all. But if you're going to do that kind of a buyout, then what are you replacing it with? Hopefully not a panic signing. And if you're going to end up paying the guy's contract out anyway, well, motivate him by putting him on the bench and bringing in one, maybe two U22 guys to play him off the field. Maybe you see what some of your second team projects like Jorge Alastue, who is real promising, but unfortunately got injured right at the beginning of the second team season. Maybe you see how he's shaping up and how he's playing. And if he is playing kids off the field in the third division, then maybe he gets some minutes, even if that lever is being looked at as a possible option. And I don't think it's in any way off the table for either Precourt or Burrell. If you're going to spend that money anyway, well, line up what you want to replace him before you replace him.
Of course, yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that some of that work is being done. There's that theory out there, and I'm believing this more and more, is that it was we're trying to get Vasquez or we're trying to get Azuni. We're working these deals because we're not sure the Vasquez thing is going to come through. We want to get one of these and feature that player as a center forward. And oops, we got them both. Oh no, we're going to try to make this work. And then maybe it doesn't work after all. And maybe you do have to offload someone. And then, I mean, the decision is pretty easy at this point, right? So you have the American player who is fairly well acclimated, who is showing that he can score, who is familiar with the league. And then you have the person who has only been here 4 or 5 months, who probably misses his wife and kid terribly, who has not really acclimated to the league. And again, if he's here for half a season and goes back, and you get somebody who can actually functionally play as a winger, because it doesn't seem necessarily that maybe that is Azuni's comfort level as much as we were led to believe that, oh yeah, sure, he can do that. He did that at Granada. Or again, maybe you get like a kind of fully functional DP level midfielder, preferably number 10, and bring that person in and let that person gel with the forwards that you have, and deploy Taylor and deploy Wolf at one of those wings, and Hader. O'Brien also, in addition to obviously having Bukri holding down that right side, which he seems to be doing, then maybe that is a better formula than what you've got now. I do want to talk real quick about June, if you are.
I've got just one last little tag to throw in there. You mentioned trying to do the Vasquez deal, trying to do the Azuni deal. They definitely wanted one of them to go. I think that the informed speculation that I think is reasonable out there is looking at it as the Vasquez deal looked like it was falling apart, and they pushed the Azuni deal forward to the point that they were pot committed. And then the Vasquez deal came back to life. Like the Lord Jesus Christ. It rose on the third day. And then they had both. And they did not
kind of
originally,
what I think happened too,
and they didn't have another plan for that other DP slot. Now, the crazy 10th dimensional chess take that I don't think is realistic at all is, well, the plan all along was to have Azuni here for half a season no matter what. And if he was great, they would keep him. But they had worked those Real Madrid connections, and they were going to flip him for a profit, some crazy thing like that. I don't think that's in the offing. I don't think the looks on various people's faces would indicate that that is at all what the plan is. But I feel like they are being far better to this player than I think many clubs would, just on a human level, which some fans would love for him to be thrown in a fire, I'm sure. That's a credit to how they are doing business and how they are making sure that they are viewed by the players in the international community, that they want to keep attracting to this club as a place that you will be treated well, that you will be you will be given all of the runway that you need to be as successful as you can be, and the rest is on you. So, Phil, with that, take us away to the glorious month of June.
Let's talk about June, shall we? Okay, so 3 games. Tonight, once you are hearing this, once I have edited on Saturday morning and put this up, we are playing Colorado in Commerce City. And then the next week, the aforementioned Red Bull of New York, New Jersey, which is going to be the only home match of the month. That is on the 14th. And then there's an international break. Will I partake of US versus Saudi Arabia? I may. Let's see what happens. That is happening in that week. So certainly that is available to you if you are missing soccer and you don't want to go a week without soccer. You can see that. And then traveling to Seattle, provided that that game happens with Club World Cup doings. I imagine that it will happen. I imagine that they will be coming off a group stage exit to some very difficult teams. So 3 matches. I predict a 1-1-1 June, which probably doesn't make a lot of people happy, especially when I tell you what I think is going to happen. I think that they are going to extend their winless streak to 9, which would be the longest regular season winless streak that this team has ever had. I do think they're going to lose like a 1-0 variety of contest Colorado. And then I do think that they're going to draw against Red Bulls, which are decent, but not fantastic. And then I do think that they're going to beat Seattle away because I think that Seattle team is going to probably rotate pretty heavily, and there's not going to be a lot of enthusiasm after seeing their team crash out in Club World Cup. And I think that that's going to be the case of Austin catching Seattle at a really opportune time in the way that they caught LAFC in a really opportune time.
So just to clarify, Phil, because in the way that you laid those out, it would mean this in regardless of which order. To refresh everyone's memory, the approved Verde all day win, loss, draw setup is it win, loss, draw? Is it win, draw, loss?
It's
In the way that you
win,
list the
loss,
number,
draw because we're Americans.
it's win, loss, draw
So,
because we're Americans.
I
So
personally prefer win, draw, loss, but I've ceded that battle. So yeah, it's win, loss, draw.
okay, so we are
And
conforming to the imperial American standard.
yes, we are.
All
Yes.
right,
Gallons, miles,
gallons,
yeah, all
miles,
that. Fahrenheit,
hectares.
yeah,
So I ask so that in delivering my prognostication, which I will join you for the month of June,
Okay.
May was too much for my mostly a comedian and also soccer analyst mind.
Right. Oh, the annoying thing about mine
Mhm.
before we get into yours
Yeah,
is with my predictions, it is going to be a 10-match winless streak before they break that against Seattle.
Okay.
So I'm predicting like several more weeks of fan adjacent misery that we'll be experiencing. And then all of you will be experiencing on your own and together. The grousing that you have done, you will continue to do for several more weeks, and then it will seem a little bit better with a win against Seattle at the end of the month. So hang in there, everybody.
So that helps inform the way that I'm going to deliver this, because as much as I love Phil, I am always very nervous of the Phil who laughs. I'm making reference to a version of the Joker in DC Comics called the Batman Who Laughs, created by my friend Scott Snyder. Like this terrifying alternate version of the Joker, when Phil laughs uncomfortably like that, oh boy, do I worry about the ill portents to come.
And you should.
Phil, I'm gonna counter both the win-loss draw prediction and the winless streak. I think the winless streak, and I'm putting this out into the wind, I believe that the not exactly Denver game in Commerce City will feature the second miracle of Denverde that will break the winless streak tomorrow night as we record this, tonight as people are listening to this. So
For the record, I hope you are right.
I have the Rapids game as a win.
Okay.
I have the Red Bulls New York game as an extraordinarily frustrating home draw.
Okay.
And then win against Seattle. I think that's a win as long as the match actually happens.
Right.
The season turning around energy of defeating a depleted Seattle on the other side of them playing a Club World Cup that they don't really actually want to play in at this point. Maybe they would care if the group they were in were stronger, but they know that they're just going to go get ground up in a meat grinder. I feel like that's what I want to put out there as belief in the optimism that Nico has put out there. If Nico and the team do not make my prophecy come true, well, then I'm a false prophet.
Okay.
And I have to deal with that. And to me, in the same way that my Doctor Stranging of the multiverse of things that would get Austin over the playoff line last year comes together, I would like to believe that this is where the turnaround happens. And I think that it's possible. Probable is a whole other conversation, but Austin does have the opportunity, have the opportunity of using some of that "you doubted us" energy that in the short life of the club has been a repeating thing. And it would be great if the fifth season were turning the page on that being a thing that everybody has to keep returning back to as some sort of comfort of, well, you doubted us. Well, laminate this. Well, that. It would be great for year 6 to find Austin growing the legend, as it were, into being a club that is not having to rely on those metaphors of young baby toddler teams and being able to walk and run and play on its own.
Yeah. As much as I love to be right, and I do love to be right, I am hoping that you are more right than I am in this month. 7 points versus 4 doesn't seem like that's a big thing, but I do think at this point that every single point that they were able to gather, every single win, every single draw that they're able to get, I think is going to be critical and crucial. Because again, they are at that part of the table where they are going to have to rely on that. And it's going to come down to a few results. And it's too bad that that's where they are because, again, like at the start of the season, I was thinking that they were going to be fourth. I was thinking they were going to be fairly comfortable, that they were going to score a lot of goals, that they were going to get wins over a number of these teams that, again, I am now not so sure, right? Like I thought, okay, yeah, Colorado, they're going to get a couple of wins there. RSL, they're going to get a couple of wins there. SKC, they're going to get a couple of wins there. I am no longer confident that they're going to be able to do those sorts of things. And then they, again, with RSL, I mean, that's already borne out to a degree, right? That is a match that they really should have had 3 points. They were lucky to get one out of that match. That Atlanta, at the start of the season, I thought, okay, Atlanta's going to be a really formidable team. That is going to be a really tough match. And then the season developed the way it did. And then all of a sudden, this looks like a very winnable bonus game, as Andrew Wiebe has christened it. And as it turns out, no, it was not. It looked like it was going to be that. And then it was a disappointment at the end. We will see. We will see where things go. And again, I do think that as the season progresses, depending on the players that get brought in the summer transfer window, looking where the schedule lines up, I do think that it's going to get easier. And there is going to be a stretch where they are going to be able to rattle off some wins and they are going to be able to get themselves back into a comfortable position. Or if they do not do that, it's going to be a repeat of 24, right? Where we saw, okay, halfway point, they're at this place where looks like it's going to be okay. Looks like they're doing some things. We still have some real big concerns about what this team is doing. In this case, last year it was defensively, and then they just went on this major skid, which was again felt in the locker room and eventually led to Wolf's downfall and ultimately being on this weird cusp where they were not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but they were certainly not going to get to the playoffs given the kind of math that they would have to do and given the goals they would have to score in order to be able to deal with the tiebreaker energy that they needed to deal with.
And on the topic of math, just something that I want to mention, which this is a very speculative kind of thing, because if we're looking at an Austin 7-point June, 7 points is the difference between where Austin is in 10th and Austin being clearly in fourth place above Seattle, Portland, and LAFC. That would be given none of the teams above them leapfrog them, but it isn't that big of a stretch when you look at the fact that Colorado is in eighth. So if it's a win against Colorado, then Colorado is not taking any of those points. LAFC has 2 games in hand. Portland has 1 game in hand. But the stagnation of the Western Conference table is something that we've seen in multiple seasons of late, and is something that arguably is very much the case this year. You know, the more things change, the more things stay the same in MLS. And Western Conference table stagnation, you can add a San Diego, doesn't take it away.
Right. Yeah, because again, like right now, Seattle on 26 points, Colorado on 22 points, Austin on 20 points. So yeah, if Austin beats both, I don't think the Sounders, I don't know what's going on with that Sunday match against Vancouver that they're supposed to have because there was the whole food poisoning in Mexico thing that they got to experience. That's the last match that they've got. And again, like if Vancouver does end up hosting that match and that does come off on Sunday, I don't know what kind of shape the Whitecaps players are in right now, but you could theoretically have a situation where Austin is able to leapfrog both Colorado and Seattle with wins against those teams this month, regardless of anything else that Austin does against the Red Bulls, which again, they're an Eastern Conference opponent, so that's not going to matter quite as much. So yeah, getting back into a playoff place, again, being 10th is not like being 14th. So they could certainly get back there and they could certainly be fine. And I see, again, with your rosy scenario, yes, I think they're right back in it and they're fine. But also, if they do lose to Colorado, all of a sudden that puts Colorado at 25 points versus Austin's 20. And depending on what the Dynamo does, depending on what FC Dallas does, that makes things a little bit trickier for them as well. Right?
That's the larger point I'm getting at is the way that I see June. as many times as we've said, this is a must-win match. This is a must-win match. Every match is a must-win match. Sure. Let's use the coach's line that every coach loves to trot out. Every match is a must-win match. To me, turning around the season, June is the pivot point around which it makes it infinitely easier to do that. Now, if you went with the 9-point scenario of 3 straight wins, which I've been accused of being relentlessly optimistic by some people, that fundamentally in the fudgy version of math still puts Austin in no higher than 4th. Austin gets no higher than 4th no matter what as a result of June. That is their ceiling, is 4th place. If they get to that ceiling in whichever version of the math works that way, I would consider that as good of a June as they could hope to have when things are not looking terribly optimistic for them. And I'm sure that the betting odds are not looking very favorable for them for any of those 3 games. It would, of course, be ideal to take all 3 points against all 3 teams, especially one of them being an Eastern Conference opponent. Frankly, that 1 point or 0 points from Red Bulls is less important than stripping points off of their conference rivals.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree with that as well. All right. So let's escape into fantasy for a second here. Let's say that we do not end up at the end of July with this exact same roster, but that we add one Kervin, Tuti, Andrade to this roster. We've talked about him a little bit. He is a Venezuelan international player. He featured for the team during Copa America. So he had an assist at Q2 Stadium as a sub in a 3-0 win against Jamaica during that interesting continental tournament that happened here. He is currently playing with Fortaleza in Brazil. He's not getting that many minutes, but did an article about him finally welded onto a perfunctory press conference thing that happened on Thursday, where we talked about the team getting much needed rest and talking about injuries and things like that. But wanted to talk about Andrade first of all, because it is an interesting rumor that's out there. This is a 20-year-old player, so he would be a U22 player if he came in, but does look like somebody who has, again, potential. It's not fully realized potential yet. He is still very young. It seems like he is still very raw, but also at the same time has a lot of promise. Looks like he could be the kind of creative force that a team like Austin could use. I think other people probably noticed that as well. I know that there are other kind of rumors floating around. I know that Orlando, again, he's a Venezuelan player, but he's with the Brazilian team, and there's this kind of Orlando Brazil connection that is happening. So maybe Orlando's just being floated because of that and because it's like a plausible rumor, but I could see that being a little bit more attractive to him as like an overall project. Although in terms of getting minutes with Martin Ojeda doing what he's doing in Orlando, if Andrade is coming to get minutes and to really test himself in a new league and develop and grow, then I think that there are worse places that he could be than Austin. Certainly Austin would be a good destination for him. And just looking at some of the tape on him and looking at kind of the charting, and basically he's kind of a mirror image of Kristen Espinoza of San Jose, possible all-star. He's a winger, very good. You look at their charts, which were in the article that I put in there, and they are really close together. And Espinoza typically plays as a right winger, and Andrade can certainly play there, but if he's able to do those kinds of things at the 10 and then still improve his goal scoring, because his goal scoring is not great right now, but certainly his ability to assist and create shots certainly could be very intriguing.
I think that the work that we or Austin have done digging deeper on this, and we mentioned this as a possible rumor last time we recorded, and it was, to me, I wasn't very much in doubt of the rumor itself having something to it. I just wanted some more info that we now have with the benefit of time. Very much feels like exactly the kind of thing that Roto Business tries to do, and timeline wise, it lines up with when we have similarly gotten reliable intel on other deals that are being worked on. The question is this the player that Roto was telling people at the season kickoff party at the beginning of the season was definitely coming? We know that a player is definitely coming. Deal is done.
Right. Yeah.
Is it him? Is it somebody else? Is there going to suddenly be this wave of reinforcements of 2, maybe 3 players, dare we dream, that come in? Are we looking at possibly seeing a high-profile transfer out for a record transfer fee of some sort or something? Maybe. I don't know. I feel like everything that we keep talking about, Tuti solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
You've got the Vinotinto connection with Danny, provided Danny is still here and not transferred for a record fee. But I have a feeling
Right.
he will probably stay here. Probably he's going to stay here because I don't see them getting a gigantic pile of money for him on the other side of injury or
Right.
performance for this season and last season. I don't know. I feel like the reliable reporting that's been done on this and the due diligence, especially from the We Are Austin guys, has me thinking it'll be a shame if this doesn't close.
Right.
That's the way I feel about it.
Here's what I think might be happening. So I think the sure player that Rhoda was talking about is Boloko.
Okay.
I feel like he's coming in. I don't know if he's going to be like senior minimum or if he's going to be supplemental. If he can be bought down to supplemental, that's great. But I do feel like just how advanced that is and what we know and who he's followed and all that, I do feel like that is the definite. And what I'm thinking right now is that Roto might be trying to work a thing where Andrade is coming in and Owen Wolf is going out.
That's the speculation that's been out there too, and I think that that's a reasonable thing to look at. It has come through reliable sources secondhand that in advance of Josh being dismissed, there was active interest in personally to move Owen because of the splash damage of everything that having father and son on the same team ended up creating for them, which wasn't good for his career, wasn't good for Josh's career. I don't think that he is in any way not wanting to play for Austin. He wants to play for whatever team. He was built very well by his dad to play for the team that pays his contract very happily and loyally. But he sure wouldn't mind a fresh start at a different club, probably in Europe, that allows him to start a real next chapter to his career. If he's still here through the summer transfer window, then secondarily laminate that receipt of Roto saying that Owen Wolf is one of the most talented players in the league, which to me was in no way bluster or like talking up his price.
Right. Yeah.
It's literal truth. Like, he's an incredibly talented player. Austin would be very happy to hang on to him, but also if they can get a gigantic amount of money for him, and he will be happier overall with his next move, and it allows Austin to bring in somebody else on the senior roster. That's a combination of things that if you are filling the Swiss Army knife shaped hole that Owen Wolf would leave, okay. I'm gonna come in on the pessimistic side of an Owen Wolf transfer out happening during this window, because I think it will deplete them too much in a midfield that's already too depleted. And even if they're bringing in midfield relief, that takes time to gel. I feel like winter window is more likely to me, where you've got European teams that very much need to suddenly plug holes or that are suddenly making Champions League runs.
Right.
That feels more advantageous on the getting what he's worth and also not leaving themselves shorthanded.
Right. But I do also feel that if Wolf goes and they want to bring him in for European preseason, that's the time where he's got to go. And if you've got Boloko already coming in who can platoon, and then you've got Andrade, who is this real talent, you're able to land that, then I think that works. Because I think at this point, Pereira, if he was going to go to Europe, like, he already would have done that. I feel like his trajectory right now is most likely he's either an MLS lifer or he's going to get a new lease on soccer career life in South America. I don't feel like Europe is necessarily where he can go at this point, kind of given where he's at. I mean, I think he's a good player, obviously, but I don't know if he's necessarily Europe developmental good, given, that he is older now, given that he did have a little bit unfairly, he did have a little bit of an injury setback. So if anybody was looking to pull the trigger this window, they might be a little more trepidatious as a result of that. I mean, if it is going to happen for Danny, it is going to happen, I think, this summer, or I think that he is going to need to probably stay in the league. And I don't think him staying in the league is necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think he can have a nice solid career, and maybe it is with Austin for the duration, or maybe it's somewhere else. But I do think Wolf is developing on the kind of trajectory, and he's still young enough to where a European team can see some potential in him and would take a flyer on him. Whereas I don't think that would necessarily be the case with Pereira at this point.
Clean, perfect goals are great, but goals don't happen without a lot of duels happening. That's the way that I think about the word argumentation. I think it's
Okay.
important. I think it's
Okay.
how we talk things out. And when I say that I love arguing, it's not that I enjoy being confrontational or aggressive or anything like that. I think that you get a lot out of arguing different points of view and finding middle ground or finding a new enlightened perspective. And the only thing that I love more than just argumentation in general is arguing with myself. So bear with me as I argue with myself.
I was wondering where this is going.
Yeah. I got you down the garden path eventually. I was not thinking about Owen Wolff as subjectively as I should have relative to the first half of the season. Thinking about the first half of the season, is he a super talented player? Absolutely. On paper, in the field and everything. Is he the right fit for this team as constructed now? I don't think he is. And I think you're onto something there where losing an Owen Wolff in the same way that I think people initially knee-jerk panicked about the notion of losing Driussi, I think that is an anxiety that will pass. You got me on your side and you didn't have to push that hard, Phil.
Okay. Yeah. I do know that there are some people that would like Driussi back at this point. I don't know that necessarily
I don't know
is
that
a
he
good
wants
idea.
to come back.
I mean, he seems to be enjoying life at River Plate of late, but
he will play at the Rose Bowl and Lumen Field if people want to go see him play.
Right. If you missed that. We don't know necessarily how solid the Andrade rumors are. This could just be bluster. We could be just going down this dead end road of hope, and we'll know come August that he's with Fortaleza and never mind, and we have to think elsewhere and all that. But I get it does speak to, again, just this idea of what would this team be like with a creative midfielder on it, and if you had to sacrifice Zuni to get that creative midfielder, would that work out? We've seen what Azuni could do with other teams. We've seen in very, very brief glimpses what he can do with Austin. But if we were to get somebody who could facilitate the offense better and set up the players that are there that can finish, then maybe that does work out better. And I don't know if Andrade is necessarily the person that does that, but there is some hope. And again, it is tricky to bring in a player in late July. We saw that with Bukari and we saw some promise, but we saw that he's been taking a while to fully gel with MLS, and we're seeing some signs of that now. We saw the flash in the Nashville game last year, but we didn't see like that much else from Bukari during the 2024 season. We are seeing more of that now, but I do feel like it's going to take maybe into 2026 before we see fully realized Bukari, assuming that he will still stay with the team as well, which I don't have any reason to believe that he won't, but certainly something to ponder and something to think about as we think about how Nico is getting these DPs acclimated to the team and how he's getting them to work with the other players, which so far this season has been spotty at best.
Whether Zuni stays or not, I don't hate anything about the general ideas of where Andrade fits into this lineup. Maybe he is the magical key that finally unlocks Zuni. Okay, cool. Look, wouldn't hate that at all. I don't think anybody would hate that. But yeah, I don't know. This is one that I hope that we are getting the rumor intel about because it is at the basically done stage. Who knows? Maybe this time next week, there is renewed word of how it looks like other clubs are out and Austin is it. I think that hearing that other clubs are interested smells like other situations where we've had Austin transfer rumors and then other clubs are interested, and that is to do with the final finagling of the price. That's where this feels like it is to me.
Okay. Yep. We shall see. It's keeping me a little bit more bought in than I was last week, I gotta say. I think it was just last week that I was saying that I don't typically like to talk about transfer rumors before they're like so far along, but this one is just so tempting to me that I'm making an exception and I am basking in the fantasy a little bit.
Yeah, because the conversation itself, it speaks to, if not this guy, it's what Austin is looking for. It is Tuti shaped. right?
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
they are looking for Tuti-shaped solutions to
Yeah.
amorphous problems.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. All right. Let's see. Anything else that we want to hit before we?
Not that I can think of, just because I love bringing up the second team because there's something interesting to discuss there at all times. Irvin Torres is
Yes.
back. He's left a U19 camp and he's not injured. He is otherwise fine, is my understanding. Wasn't any kind of a falling out with U.S. soccer and nothing remotely that dramatic. Just literally,
Gotcha.
sometimes people need to take care of other stuff that doesn't have to do with football. And
Gotcha.
nobody
Yep.
should worry about Irvin Torres. Nico Van
Okay.
Ryn got his second call up of the year for the Rapids game. And if he presumably doesn't end up playing, then he'll be available the next day to play against Rapids 2. And in theory, similar to what we've seen earlier in the season, you might just randomly see some more often first teamers who just hang back in Colorado. Maybe if CJ Fodre doesn't get any minutes, then he hangs back and plays against Rapids too.
Stuff
Riley
in
Thomas
Cleveland could
played
use
with the second
confidence
team
boost.
last weekend.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So we could see some ostensible first teamers against Colorado 2.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't roll off the tongue as well as it should, maybe.
Yeah.
It's kind of there.
Yeah.
But it takes some effort.
I keep trying to find interesting semi-bullying diminutives for other teams in MLS Next Pro, and as I like to
That's
call
fun.
Minnesota United FC 2, Minnesota Timbers 2, the Toombers.
Yep, that's good.
I tried to make Rapids Deuce happen, but I put the effort in, but it doesn't work, and I hate them so much that I almost don't want to put too much effort into trying to give their marketing team a nickname for free.
Sure. Yeah. No, makes sense. All right. Hopefully we will have an enjoyable Saturday night watching Austin in Commerce City in Mountain Time. So a little bit later start time than normal. And then, of course, we will see you back at Q2 on the 14th against the energy drink team. And don't know if there is anything else that we need to say other than be well and stay hydrated.
That is like the worst thing I've ever heard in the history of the 7 years that I've been on this planet.